It's time for the JMRA Football Podcast, a podcast for the fans by a fan. Yeah! Here's your host, Derek Jones.
Hey everybody, it's time for another edition of the JMRA Football Podcast. I am your host, Derek Jones, here with you today to recap Week 2. Well, at least so far, there's a doubleheader on a Monday night, but plenty of Week 2 action to sink our teeth into. But before we get to that, the social media rundown. You can check us out on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok by searching Joe Montana's right arm. Well, what a weird Week 2 it was. It was a fun Week 2, but yielded some pretty bizarre results, some awesome results, and we'll give it all to you here in the next few moments. But a few takeaways from yesterday's action, or as I like to call it, 5 things we learned. Number 1, the Bengals are in big trouble, folks. Now, let me throw this historical caveat in there before we get to this. The last team to start 0-2 as a Super Bowl runner-up, the 2015 Seattle Seahawks, they ended up going to the playoffs. They won a playoff game. They lost in Carolina, they lost in Carolina. I was like, wait a minute, did they? They lost to Carolina in round 2 in the divisional round as the Panthers would go on to go to the Super Bowl. That's not happening with this Bengals team. The Bengals are not blocking. Look, they've had a lot of pieces move around on that offensive line as far as free agency goes, the draft, all this stuff. Yes, it will take some time for this offensive line to gel, but to a degree, blocking is blocking, y'all. I mean, if you have a good offensive line, sure, it's going to take some time if the guys haven't played together. But Joe Burrow right now is on pace to get sacked 93 times this season. 93 times. That is in earshot of the all-time record, which I believe is held by the expansion Texans in 2002. So you're looking at like 100-ish sacks. 102, I think, was the number. You're looking at that as being a potential situation right now. And if he gets hit, and this is the other problem, if he gets hit, folks, he's going to get hurt. That's the other thing, too. You just can't keep taking these hits as a quarterback. I'm not even getting into his injury history, but you just can't keep taking those repeated blows time after time after time. And, you know, I think this all goes back to last year's draft. Now, I'm not saying they should have drafted Sewell over Chase, but I guess I am saying that. The problem is when you take Chase in the first round last year, you then have really made it a little bit more of a challenge for yourself to build the offensive line. So they didn't build that offensive line. They lose the Super Bowl, of course, in part because they can't block Aaron Donald. I mean, not that many people can, but they just didn't have enough time for Joe Burrow on that fourth down play in the Super Bowl to eventually try to win the game. It's one of those deals where, look, you're going for points. You're going for trying to get the splash guys, trying to get the skill guys around Burrow, but it ain't going to matter if you don't have the people to block. So big problems, I think, in Cincinnati moving forward. I would not be surprised if they miss the playoffs altogether. Speaking of missing the playoffs altogether, 2 0-2 teams right now that made the playoffs from a year ago, the Bengals and the Las Vegas Raiders, who lost a heartbreaker yesterday that we'll talk about coming up in a little bit, because the Raiders were up 20-0 at home against the Cardinals, and the Cardinals were all but ready to tap out until Kyler Murray said, you know what, not so fast. Bengals and Raiders at 0-2, going to have a hard time, especially the Raiders, getting out of that AFC West, and the AFC West might be a little overvalued, which leads to number 3. It's pretty evident after watching last Thursday night's game between the Chiefs and the Chargers. The AFC West is a 2-team race. It is not a 4-team race. Now, you can argue whether the other two teams in the division are going to make it challenging for the Chiefs and Chargers. That's a different discussion. But ultimately, the question is this. Are those two teams and the Broncos and Raiders good enough to compete with the Chiefs and the Chargers? Maybe on a given Sunday they might be, but I think in the end, in the totality of a season, no. The Chiefs and the Chargers are a cut above the rest in the AFC West. Russell Wilson looks not so great right now. The Raiders look not so great right now. Devontae Adams really hasn't made that big of an impact for them. And I think that's going to be a big-time problem for the rest of the AFC West. You know, we went into the season thinking this was going to be this crazy division. I don't know if it's going to be so crazy now, folks. Speaking of divisions, number 4, the NFC East. The Giants at 2-0. The Washington whatevers, Commanders football team, they're 1-1. Really after getting handled by Detroit yesterday. The Eagles, after Monday Night Football, will either be 2-0 or 1-1. And the Dallas Cowboys are now 1-1. I'm not saying the NFC East is going to be a good division, but it's going to be a very interesting division because I don't think the Eagles are good enough to win it in a walk. And I'm going to make a prediction. I think between the Cowboys, between the Giants and Washington, more so the Giants and the Cowboys, one of those two teams ain't going away so fast. The Giants are 2-0 now with really not great play over the first two games. So that might be a little bit of pixie dust on their part. But their schedule is not hard. Again, I said this a couple weeks ago when we were going over the season preview. The NFC East teams have the easiest schedule in the NFL this year. The Giants, Washington, Dallas, and the Eagles were on the bottom 4 in terms of easiest schedules in the league. So you could sit here and rip the NFC East, which is very easy to do, but I think it's going to be very difficult for this race to get separated by a good portion because of just how weak the schedule is. And it's obviously it's going to come down to division games, but man, I would not be shocked if we see another result besides the Eagles winning. The Giants look interesting. Even the Cowboys, who at 1-1, I would not count them out yet. I mean, I know it's easy to after the Dak Prescott injury, but I think, you know, everyone pronounced and I was one of them. Everyone pronounced the Cowboys dead last Sunday after the loss to Tampa, and then Dak is out for the year. But if they can somehow make their way through the schedule, they've got a chance. Not many people thought they'd win yesterday. That's a pretty good start. We'll see when Dak can come back. Allegedly, the new timetable now is whenever he can effectively grip a football, whatever that means. That could be in 3 weeks. That could be in 7 weeks. Who knows? But we'll see how that shakes out. And then, number 5. Folks, the Dolphins are going to be a problem. And they're going to be a problem from one aspect. How are you going to check, when they run 4 verticals, how are you going to stop Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill? Going to be tough. Going to be very tough. I think that poses one of the big challenges in the NFL for defenses. You know, to me, Tua still has some things you worry about during the course of the game sometimes, where like if you get him off the spot a little bit and have him dart around, it's tough for him to make plays sometimes on the run. Not that I worry about his arm strength, but his arm strength has to come from basically a clean pocket set position. I don't think you're going to see him do a Mahomes and run around the pocket and then run to the right, run to the left, and then chuck the ball 80 yards downfield. That's going to be tough. But you've got to be impressed from what you saw of the Dolphins yesterday. And that leads us to our first discussion as we tell you about the game of the week. Tua Tagovailoa throws for 469 yards and 6 touchdowns. I repeat, Tua, 469, 6 touchdown passes. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? That's an incredible stat line, and we'll get to Tua more so in a second, but here's a breakdown of the game. The Dolphins trailed 28-7. They gave up a kickoff for a touchdown to start the game, courtesy of Devin Duvernay. So they were down 21. They were down 21 also then to start the fourth quarter until really that's when the game changed. Jalen Waddle, Tyreek Hill, they went to work, both having 11 catches. I believe it's the first time in NFL history where a pair of teammates both had at least 11 catches and both went over 100 yards in the same game. Waddle, 11 catches, 171, 2 scores. Hill, 11 catches, 190 yards, and 2 touchdowns. For the Ravens, you look at the 4 possessions they had during the fourth quarter. Downs, they lose the ball. Punt, field goal, end of game. Those were their 4 possessions, and the problem for them is weaved around all that was a lot of Miami scoring. So big problem and disappointment there for Baltimore. Lamar Jackson threw for 318 yards and 3 touchdowns. The Dolphins play Buffalo next week in Miami, which is very, very interesting. But before we mosey on away from this game, a couple of things here to take from this. Number one, I think, Tua was very honest during the week and talked about his struggles sometimes as a quarterback in terms of him being able to see properly. And a lot of people took that as, wow, I can't believe this guy admitted that, blah, 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 blah. Even still, like, the question is, the guy has the smarts to play the quarterback position, duh. The question with him has been arm strength. To me, that's the biggest thing. He doesn't need to be Patrick Mahomes. He really doesn't. He doesn't need to be Aaron Rodgers. He just needs to be able to do enough to exploit the talents of the people around him. That's it. People get caught up in this thing where, he's got to look like John Elway and all that. He doesn't have to, okay? He does not have to. I really think that if the Dolphins win next week against Buffalo, that's really going to set the table for a very interesting race in the AFC, because then you put the Dolphins at 3-0 with one of their toughest games on the schedule already in their back pocket. So I think that Miami has a very good chance. I love Mike McDaniel. Love Mike McDaniel. I think he's awesome. I really enjoy him I just enjoy listening to his interviews, and I think he's a good head coach. He said after the game, I wanted to see what the team would do faced with adversity. And then he said, I didn't think they'd actually take me on to this degree with that point, but still, we were able to get it done. Look, Baltimore has some secondary issues, and clearly Miami exploited that. Tua was able to throw the ball down the field effectively, which again has to be a great sign for Dolphins fans. So, huge win for Miami. And Miami, with that offense, you're going to need some defense to win the Super Bowl or get to the Super Bowl, but as far as getting into the playoffs, man, I'm not saying it's a layup for them, but, they keep Tua upright and healthy. They're going to have to do some work to screw that up. The other big game in the day in terms of comebacks, there were 2 actually. We'll get to the first one here. Cardinals 29, Raiders 23 in overtime. The Raiders led 20-0, blew the lead. It's the largest blown lead in franchise history. Not a great way for Josh McDaniels to start his second tenure as a head coach. This game was so weird to watch because I remember, watching Red Zone, because in the Philly area we had the Bengals-Cowboys game being shown. So I'm flipping back because the Bengals-Cowboys really didn't get interesting until the second half. But they put the Raiders-Cardinals game on Red Zone a lot yesterday because the Broncos-Texans game was just an all-out dud. But when you look at how the game played out, the Raiders were in control of the game for most of the way. And then they just didn't have the ball. I mean, that's one of the most damning things about this. The Raiders just, you look at these drives by the Cardinals, the scoring drives. Go back to when the game was first broken through on the side of the Cardinals. 11 plays, 79 yards, 5 minutes, 27 seconds. Next scoring drive. 1 yard touchdown run. 9 plays, 54 yards, 3 minutes and 54 seconds. Next drive. Kyler Murray, 3-yard touchdown run. Last play of regulation. 18 plays, 73 yards. By the way, you think Raider fans are tired of seeing these 18, 19, 20 play drives to end games? That was basically the end of the Chargers game last year to end the regular season. 18 plays, 73 yards, 4 minutes and 43 seconds. You're starting to get the idea here. Those drives are about roughly 15 minutes of game action. The Raiders' defense was on the field for what felt like forever during the course of the game in the second half. Now, you look at time of possession, it's not that stark of a difference. The Raiders held the ball for 29 minutes in the game, which isn't terrible in overtime. But when you take a look at what the Cardinals did, 36 minutes, much of that damage was done all in a cluster. So for the Raiders, they just could not get anything going offensively. When you look at their drives in the second half, it just punt, field goal, punt, fumble, game over. Those were the Raiders' second half possessions. I reiterate, punt, field goal, punt, fumble. That's it. They had the ball 5 times in the second half. And let's see if we can do the math here. 11, 14, 19, ran 24 plays basically in half 2 and OT. You're going to lose a lot of games doing that. You are. You're going to lose a lot of games with that kind of breakdown. So Hunter Renfrow fumbles in overtime. The Raiders lose. Byron Murphy almost committed the gaffe of the season so far. He picks up the football and runs 59 yards for a touchdown. Right as he got to the goal line, he flipped the ball forward. Now, according to Next Gen Stats, he was 0.2 seconds away from flipping that ball out before he crossed the goal line, which meant, if it happened, that would have been a touchback. Can you imagine the disaster? Can you imagine the chaos that would have taken place if he actually did that? But my goodness, what a game it was. Credit Kyler Murray. I mean, that's really the overriding point of this game. Kyler Murray was a one-man gang towards the end of that game. He made a ton of plays with his legs. His numbers, 31 of 49, 277 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. He ran the ball 5 times for 28 yards and a touchdown. I mean, those numbers sound okay, but it's sheer will that got the Cardinals over the top there late, thanks to Murray. And again, Murray was able to extend so many plays with his feet, and that made the Raiders' defense tired. It doesn't show up necessarily in those time of possession numbers, but ultimately in the end, it made all the difference. Jets 31, Browns 30. This game was silly. This game was silly. The Jets were down 2 scores. So, okay, let's go back here because this is how to lose a game in just total insanity. Like, the Browns laid out a perfect game plan for how to mess up the end of a game. So Cleveland is on their way, it looks like, to winning the game. So they have the ball in the fourth quarter. So Nick Chubb scores with about 2 minutes left. They're just over 2 minutes left, 2:02 to be exact. He scores on a 12-yard run to make it 30-17. Now here's the problem. He shouldn't have scored. Because at that point, the Jets are up against it. They don't really have a way to stop the clock enough under the 2-minute warning to be able to win the game or to be able to be in the position to win the game. And the other part of it too is at that point, if you're the Browns, you just need 3, right? You don't even need the touchdown. You don't even need it. You get 3, that makes it what? 27-17. Sometimes doing less in those situations is a whole heck of a lot more than scoring. So the Jets get the ball back down by 13. But here's where, and this is where teams screw up these double-digit leads. It's the ability to be able to stabilize a game and sit on it for a little while so that way you don't have to worry about issues down the line. That's not what happened here. The Jets get the ball back. They run all of 4 plays. And here were the 4 plays. The kickoff, a 9-yard pass play, and then a 66-yard touchdown pass from Joe Flacco to Corey Davis. And the 4th play is the extra point. That's a disaster scenario. You cannot allow 2-play scoring drives when you're up by 2 scores late, because here's why. On the next play, after the extra point's the onside kick. The Jets get the onside kick, then they end up scoring on a touchdown pass from Joe Flacco to Garrett Wilson, 15-yarder, boom, extra point, 31-30. At that point, there's only really, 15 seconds left in the game. Jacoby Brissett gets intercepted, boom, Jets win. One of the great comebacks in recent Jets history. I mean, the Jets were dead in the water. The Jets were dead in the water in that game, and the Browns let them hop right back on into it. And that's why you're seeing all these teams blow these double-digit leads. It's just execution. Execution. All Nick Chubb has to do, okay, all he has to do is not score. He doesn't score, the Browns probably win the game. Probably win the game. And instead, the Jets are able to run off little time and able to score in short order first to cut it to a touchdown game, and then get the onside kick, score again. Crazy. But the Jets now 1-1 on the season, and the Browns a painful 1-1 on the year. We go to New Orleans. Tampa 20, Saints 10. Not the best game for Tom Brady, 18 of 34, under 200 yards passing and a touchdown pass, but it's kind of hard to be explosive when you're throwing to second and third string wide receivers. He had to target the football a lot to Scotty Miller, who didn't even really play, I believe, last week against Dallas. But eventually they figured it out, and they had to, because Mike Evans got ejected in the game along with Marshawn Lattimore for continuing what is the equivalent to Rock versus Austin at this point from an NFL standpoint as far as on-field rivalry goes. They get into a scrum, all because Brady threw a pass downfield to Scotty Miller. It looked like there was some contact by Lattimore. Brady ran down the field, or at least, I guess, speed walked down the field to talk to an official. Lattimore yelled at him, and then eventually it led to Mike Evans getting involved. Bruce Arians was on the sideline. I don't ever remember seeing, at least this early on, I don't ever remember seeing a former head coach who is literally months removed from stepping down as head coach be on the sideline. I'm sure it's happened at some point, but I don't remember happening this quick. It was week 2, guys. Arians was in the booth last week, in a box, okay. But now, on the sideline, that was a little weird. But anyways, Evans ends up in a fight with Marshawn Lattimore. They get ejected. Now, there's word there might be a suspension coming down. And if there is, boy, what an inopportune time for Evans to get suspended if that's the case. Godwin's banged up. Julio Jones sat. And, they need all the help they can get the next 2 weeks, because the Bucs have the Packers and Chiefs the next 2 weeks. You're going to need to score some points, obviously, against those two teams. But it was a 3-3 game until eventually Tampa takes control. Tom Brady hits Rashad Perryman in the end zone to make it a 10-3 game. They eventually tack on a field goal. And then a pick six courtesy of Mike Edwards off the arm of Jameis Winston. And he runs it back for 6. So Edwards with the pick 6 to help solidify the win for the Bucs, who have played excellent defense the first 2 games. The offense has been slow to get going. And with the receiver injuries, which is not good considering, you've got a long way to go, and this receiving core is already banged up a considerable amount. We'll see if Tampa can hang in there. You knew going into the start of the year that this was going to be a tough stretch for them. And for them to get through the first 2 games on the road 2-0, you have to tip the cap. No matter how they got it done, they got it done. So now Tampa will go next week into their home opener against Green Bay, 425 start there, looking to move to 3-0. And look, Brady's obviously very frustrated by what's happening. You can see all the emoting on the field, the throwing of the tablet and all that stuff. Now people are trying to make it a referendum deal. Can you imagine if Kyler Murray did that? Can you imagine if Aaron Rodgers did that? That was a tweet. One of which was from James Jones, who is Aaron Rodgers' former teammate. Like, really? We're going to take, like, Packer fans can't help it. All Packer fans do is obsess over Brady. It is hilarious. They just worry and worry and worry and worry. Silly. But anyhow, Tampa, Green Bay, next Sunday. We'll see how that goes. For the Saints, they've got a problem right now because, I liked them at the start of the year because I thought Jameis would do enough to be able to stay out of his own way, but he's way too aggressive. These low-scoring games, he needs to be in a higher-scoring game because he plays too much like Madden football. You know how Madden, like you play somebody and they never want to take a check down? They just want to throw the ball 50 yards downfield? That's Jameis. He doesn't want to take the check down. He doesn't want to take the easy play. Always going for broke. And when you go for broke too much, it's going to end up badly. And that's exactly what happened for the Saints yesterday. So the Tampa Bay Buccaneers win for the first time in New Orleans since their playoff win during the 2020 season. And it's their first regular season win in New Orleans in 4 years. So the Bucs able to get it done against the Saints in New Orleans in the regular season for once. Lions 36, Commanders 27. Amon-Ra St. Brown, over 100 yards receiving, 2 touchdowns, a long rushing play as well in the mix for him. There's something so likable about the Lions. And I think a part of it is Dan Campbell. I think a part of it is how they were presented on Hard Knocks. Hard Knocks has not been great as of late, but I will say they do a great job of making you want to root for some of these teams. And the Lions seem like such a likable team, from the St. Brown family to Dan Campbell, even Jared Goff. You almost feel bad for him. They was just kind of cast aside in LA. They go out obviously and win the Super Bowl last year, and here's Goff left kind of holding the bag in Detroit now. And since he got there, just felt like everyone is kind of schemed to figure out, okay, where can we go from here at quarterback after we have this guy? I think that's obviously a pretty significant concern for them down the line. I think if you want to take the step to the next level, is that the guy to be able to do it for you? But that doesn't really matter right now. The good news for the Lions is they've played 2 games, and they've scored 71 points in 2 games. That's pretty impressive. And the defense has got some work to do. I think their defense is still a couple players away. But offensively, Amon-Ra St. Brown, obviously DeAndre Swift, they've got some weapons on offense. The question is, how consistent can they stay? That might be a challenge for them throughout the course of the season. But so far, so good through 2 games. And I think they've got a chance. This is a team that is going to play hard. And that, to me, can get you through a lot of Sundays where you're playing against these lowly, bad, underwhelming teams. And that's the thing. There are only but a handful of good teams in the NFL. If you can kind of hold par against the Drek, you're going to be in the playoff race. So we'll see how the Lions, and if the Lions are able to stay in this as we move along. Cowboys 20, Bengals 17. Horrible loss for the Bengals. Cooper Rush, man, this is being recorded early Monday morning. Very interested to see the Cooper Rush versus Dak Prescott takes, because you can already hear him last week. Phil Simms made a comment that there wouldn't be a significant drop-off from Dak to Cooper Rush. And I'll tell you what, Cooper Rush is no Ben DiNucci. Ben DiNucci made the Cowboys basically not competitive at the quarterback spot. Cooper Rush looks like he has some moxie. I hate that word, especially in NFL terms. Looks like he has some moxie to him. He can play a little bit. And if Cooper Rush can at least keep things level for the Cowboys, that defense right now has played outstanding football through the first 2 games. They held Tampa to 1 touchdown. They basically held the Bengals to 1 touchdown. They've done a great job. And, I mean, a large part of that is obviously the play of Micah Parsons. Micah Parsons looks like, Derek Thomas Lawrence Taylor, I mean, not as great as Lawrence Taylor, obviously, but he looks tremendous off the edge and rushing the passer. And, going back to what we talked about in the beginning of the show, the Bengals' offensive line is a big problem. And you can sit here and you can give me Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and Joe Mixon, but if they can't block it, it doesn't matter. If they can't block it, everything else is irrelevant. You can have the greatest skill players in the world. If you can't block, you're not going to win. And that's going to be a big trick here for the Bengals coming up to try to turn this season around. Because, look, the AFC North is down right now, I think. When you look at Pittsburgh, not as good as they once were. Obviously, there's an issue there without TJ Watt and that pass rush. The Ravens are a little beat up defensively already. And then the Browns probably have the best defense on paper. But even them, they just went out there and gave up 31 points to the Jets. So how good are they? So I think you have to be definitely concerned if you're a Bengals fan in the main scheme of things. As far as the division goes, I don't think they're out of it. But, man, they better start blocking for Joe Burrow. Because if they don't, there's going to be somebody else playing quarterback for the Bengals coming up later on this year. Jaguars 24, Colts 0. The Colts have given you now, in the last year, okay, actually less than that in terms of calendar year, their last 2 games in Jacksonville have basically been no-shows. Basically no-shows. They've been terrible. 24-0? Now, they didn't have Michael Pittman, so, I mean, you get why they might struggle to score. I get that. But Jonathan Taylor really couldn't get anything going. They just weren't good offensively at all. And then on the defensive side, the Jaguars aren't spectacular. They do have some guys who can help move the football. I like Trevor Lawrence. Christian Kirk obviously has been a big help to them. He scored a couple of touchdowns yesterday. James Robinson looked good again. So the Jaguars, I think when you start talking about, Super Bowl contenders and things like that, I don't think they're a team who's necessarily going to be in that conversation. But in the AFC South, why can't they win it? Why can't they win it? I think they can win it very easily. Very easily. Giants 19, Panthers 16. Not much to roll through on this game because it was very unspectacular. The Giants, we're talking about this with the Lions. You got to hold par with the bad teams. If a team like Carolina is coming into your building, you've got to win the game. When you look at the numbers from this, it's really not anything super spectacular from the Giants. Daniel Jones kind of had a pedestrian day, 22 of 34, 176 yards and a touchdown. Saquon Barkley averaged under 4 yards a carry, 21 for 72. Not great. Nobody really did anything that, you look at and say, okay, this is excellent. No. But what was pretty good yesterday, the Giants' defense. The Giants' defense forced some turnovers of Carolina, and as a result, were able to ultimately win the game. Carolina, during the contest, lost 2 fumbles, and then you also look at their ability to throw the ball. That was unspectacular. They were 14 of 29 on the day through the air for 129 yards. Dreck. It's total dreck. Not much offensively either side. Both teams were not good on third downs, but here's a number, speaking of third downs, that you want to focus on from the Carolina standpoint. 2 of 12 on third down conversions. You're not going to beat anybody, typically in the NFL, going 2 of 12 on third down. So not an impressive performance at all by Carolina. The Giants, again, hold serve at home, do a nice job, and defensively, they're able to hold Christian McCaffrey, by and large, at bay in terms of keeping him out of the end zone for the most part. Carolina, really, when you take a look at it, their only offensive points of the day came from a Baker Mayfield to DJ Moore touchdown pass. Other than that, I mean, it wasn't great. They only had 275 yards of offense. McCaffrey did carry the ball 15 times for 102 yards, but, you need more. You need more from those guys, and they weren't able to get it. And Carolina now drops to 0-2 on the young season. 49ers 27, Seahawks 7. I mean, the result is almost secondary to what happened. Now, obviously, with the 49ers losing last week, it was important for them to win. But the big news, Trey Lance suffers a significant ankle injury. He'll be out in all likelihood for the rest of the season. Jimmy Garoppolo steps back in as the starting quarterback for the 49ers. Can you imagine if the 49ers let go of Garoppolo to have him ending up playing for the Seahawks or something? Can you now imagine that? The 49ers wisely kept him. I'm sure they tried to deal him, but they ended up keeping him. And, I think on the Joe Montana's Right Arm Facebook page, I posted news of the injury to Trey Lance. And the most common response I got from 49er fans was, this is what happens when you try to run your quarterback between the tackles. And yeah, maybe that's the thing. I think you have to be very careful when you try to run your quarterback like that. You look at the guys who have had short-lived careers running the football. They were the window. That's the problem. The window becomes smaller for these guys in terms of how long they can keep doing that. So, you feel badly for Trey Lance. And now Jimmy Garoppolo steps in. And, the 49ers, a lot of people believe they have a Super Bowl roster with Jimmy Garoppolo or even outside of the quarterback spot. We'll see. They have good receivers. I don't know about the running back spot being able to hold up because it seems like they've been crestfallen by injury over the last few years. Being able to keep that position healthy, that's been a challenge for them. But we'll see if they're able to stay healthy on the offensive side. Defensively, look, the Seahawks come into your building, you hold them to 7 points. What more do you need to ask for? And actually, the 7 points was on a blocked field goal, so their offense really did nothing all day against the 49ers. So the 49ers take care of business with the 27-7 win. And look, I think that the other larger problem here for the 49ers is this. Trey Lance has not played a lot of football. And now he's going to go into his third year next season, having played a limited amount in 2021 because of Jimmy Garoppolo starting, a limited amount in 2022 because of this injury, and now 23. What do you do? Do you put him back out there on the field? I don't know. There are a lot of issues there to kind of consider. So I don't know if the 49ers will just automatically give that job back to Trey Lance. We'll see. I think a large part of it's going to depend on what happens with Garoppolo. If Garoppolo can get them to the Super Bowl, you can't go back to Trey Lance. I know it's not fair for a guy to lose his job because of injury, but you can't go back to him at that point, in my opinion. Broncos 16, Texans 9. The Broncos just look terrible on offense. 2 games, 16 points, game 1, 16 points, game 2. Russell Wilson, unspectacular against the Texans. Now look, Matt Ryan threw for over 300 yards against the Texans. So that's not like the no-fly zone Broncos there. I mean, you should be able to move the ball through the air. They lost Jerry Jeudy during the game to a shoulder injury. So that clearly impacted the Broncos' passing attack a little bit, but just not impressive at all. And that's scary. You paid a lot of money to Russell Wilson to be the answer quarterback, and he gave you the following numbers yesterday. 14 of 31, 219 yards, a touchdown, an interception, sacked 3 times. Passer rating 66.5. That's not good enough. Now, Courtland Sutton did a lot of the work, 7 catches, 122 yards, but you lose Tim Patrick. You've now lost Jerry Jeudy for we'll see how long. And he only caught 1 ball for 11 yards yesterday. So, yeah, you can pin it on the injury or whatever, but still, come on. They've got to figure this out, man. I think it's a real strain here to think about Denver being a playoff team if they're going to play offense at this level. You're not going to survive in that division scoring 16 points per game. And kudos to the Texans. They've had a lot of tumult over the last 24 months. And they're trying, Tied week 1. Lost a tight one on Sunday. So we'll see how it goes moving forward with the Broncos on their side. The Texans, Texans have a chance in that AFC South because of how bad the division is, but as far as the Broncos go, they better get their act together. Otherwise, there's not going to be much of a postseason appearance for them in the months to come. Packers 27, Bears 10. Why do we keep getting subjected to this game on Sunday Night Football? I mean, I know the answer to it, which I'll get to in a second, but I don't want to see this anymore. I'm tired of it. No more, please. No more. It just looked like the Packers got bored right around the same time America got bored. Why do we keep getting force-fed this game? Well, the shorthand answer is twofold. They're going to tell you it's a rivalry game, blah, 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 blah. The real answer is Chicago is the number 3 market in the United States. Okay? They're not going to have the number 3 market sit on the sidelines. They're just not going to. A team in the number 3 market is going to have primetime games. That is going to happen. So then you start looking around. Well, if the Bears stink, how else do we show them? Well, typically, the way to show them is show them on high-profile games. What are their high-profile games? Typically, it's Green Bay because of the rivalry. And that's what they try to sell you on. But it doesn't... This is not a rivalry right now, man. This is just one team beating the hell out of the other. It's not a rivalry. I don't understand. I don't understand why we keep seeing this game. Why? I don't want to see it anymore, please. It just feels like such a throwaway. I just don't care about it. It's just not fun. It's over. It's over before it gets started. Terrible. Elsewhere, Rams 31, Falcons 27. The Rams were up in this game huge, and then they damn near blew the game. And I got to tell you, I have not even been remotely impressed with what I've seen from the Rams so far here through 8 quarters. The Rams just look like they're not hungry, / they're kind of disinterested, / they're kind of the team that's just waiting around now for the postseason, which always stinks to see. You know, it's not fun. But the Falcons were down in this game, of all things, 28-3, before forging a comeback to get a block punt to draw it closer late. And then they had the ball, 31-25 late. They were moving the ball, and then Mariota gets intercepted by Jalen Ramsey in the end zone, and that pretty much sinks the ship of the Atlanta Falcons. As a safety later, they fall 31-27. The Falcons now 0-2 on the year. The Rams even up their record to 1-1. Matthew Stafford, 3 touchdown passes, 2 interceptions. Cooper Kupp, machine. Another day. Double-digit receptions, 11 catches, 108 yards, 2 touchdowns. I mean, it's not like they have, like prime era John Taylor or Alvin Harper over there opposite Cooper Kupp. Allen Robinson's fine. He had 4 catches for 53 yards and a touchdown. But these teams can't do anything with Kupp. They can't do anything with him. That's going to be a storyline to watch as the season goes on. How are teams going to step up against him? I mean, they're not doing anything. Just awful. Awful defense. Anyhow, the Rams, defending Super Bowl champions, not looking great to start the 2022 season. And as we head down the home stretch here, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this game. Patriots beat the Steelers 17-14. Mitch Trubisky against Mac Jones. Let me read you the stat line here from these two quarterbacks. Mac Jones was 21-35, 252 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. It was an awful interception that he threw that it got picked off by Minkah Fitzpatrick. I don't like either quarterback right now. Mitchell Trubisky, 21-33, 168, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. Unspectacular football. Najee Harris, 15 carries, 49 yards. Not great there. Just basically, the Steelers tried to draw close later on, and then once they got into the fourth quarter, neither team did anything on offense, and it ended up being a 17-14 game. The Patriots went up 17-7 late in the third, and then the Steelers try to draw closer, like I said, with the touchdown to make it 17-14, and that was all the scoring. I mean, you credit the Patriots defense. They did what they had to do against the Steelers offensively, but the Steelers offensively right now are a shell of their former selves, in part because of what's going on at quarterback. And then defensively, they don't have TJ Watt. I think, the Patriots offense is as unspectacular as it gets in football right now. But in this game, they didn't have to do a lot because the Steelers offense right now is just very murky. They don't have any solid identity yet to me on offense, whether it's Najee Harris running the ball or whatever you're going to do in the passing game. Like, they don't have an identity. And until they find that, I think it's going to be tough for them moving forward. And lastly, we'll go back to Thursday night. The Chiefs 27, the Chargers 24. Man, there's no reason why the Chargers should have lost this game. The way that game started out, they scored the first 10 points of the game. And then, they give up a couple nonsense touchdowns. And then as it turns out, the game sets up for a big moment. The big sequence in this game, 17 all ball game. The Chargers have the ball. They get it down to the 1 yard line, and then Herbert gets picked for 99 yards. It gets run back for a score, and then that's pretty much the ball game, 24-17. But the big news out of this game is Justin Herbert's rib injury. Herbert got hurt, I believe, on the subsequent drive after the interception, and then had to try to play through it the rest of the way. And look, I don't think he should have stayed in the game. I mean, it's a 27-17 game with 3:20 left to go. Yes, we just watched a game this weekend where the Jets pretty much erase that deficit, being down, by 13 points pretty quickly. Yeah, you want to leave Herbert in to see what you can do, but he's also dealing with a rib injury. Look, the worst Justin Herbert is having no Justin Herbert. So, a big gamble there to leave him in the game. He was able to scratch out a touchdown late, and then eventually cut it to a 27-24 game. But it was not enough for the Chargers as they fall by 3 to Kansas City. Patrick Mahomes, 24-35, 235, 2 touchdowns, and a bunch of dropped interceptions. I mean, nobody in the NFL is luckier than Mahomes. Nobody. Nobody is luckier at having interceptions either called back because of penalty, having interceptions called back because it hits the defender in the hands and he drops it and it's overturned. There was a sizzle reel put out last year with all the interceptions in terms of drops that Mahomes had thrown. I mean, you might want to strike up the band again. I mean, my God. The man lives lucky. Lives lucky. Justin Herbert on the other side, 33 of 48, 334, 3 touchdown passes, and the costly interception. And that moves the Chargers to 1-1 on the year. The Chiefs now at 2-0. And it really puts into focus what we thought was going to be the best division in football in the AFC West, and it still has a chance, obviously, to be that. But, I think, again, as I said earlier, Chargers, Chiefs, 2 best teams in the AFC West, by far. Big win for the Chiefs. The Chargers, you'd like to have seen them win that game, but, again, the Chargers have won before. I believe they've won the last 2 years in Kansas City, and it didn't do anything for them. We'll see if things can shift for them back down the line against the Chiefs when they head into Los Angeles. And now, before we wrap things up, a look at the JMRA Player of the Week.
The JMRA Player of the Week.
Easy selection this week. How do you go against somebody who threw for 469 yards and 6 touchdowns in a game? How can you do that? Pretty simple. Tua Tagovailoa is this week's JMRA Player of the Week. 469 yards through the air. Now look, I saw some people commenting about the passes that were like the long passes that he threw to Tyreek Hill that were caught for touchdowns, saying he underthrew him. He did. He did not hit him in stride, but he hit him. So, I mean, we can sit here and quibble about hitting a guy in stride and whatnot, but give me a break. I mean, he was amazing. 36 of 50, 469 yards, 6 touchdown passes, 2 picks, but still, to win on the road at Baltimore, which has never been an easy place to win at during the Harbaugh era, that is a spectacular win for Tua and the Miami Dolphins. Credit to him for showing up and as they say in the streets, showing out. Tua is this week's player of the week, and we'll see if he can keep it going. 2 more games to close out week 2. A random week 2 doubleheader of Monday Night Football. I don't have a problem with the Monday Night Football doubleheader, but they counter-program against themselves. It's in week 2, and then the games are happening basically at the same time. The Titans play the Bills tonight at 7:15, and then soon after that, you're going to get Vikings-Eagles. That one kicks off at 8:30. Why? Why counter-program yourself? But one will be on ABC, the other will be on ESPN. I believe the plan is Bills-Titans on ESPN at 7:15, and then Eagles-Vikings on ABC at 8:30. So just weird. They're on the same net. Like if it was ABC, CBS, CBS, Fox, some combination. I get it. They're owned by the same company. I don't get it. But anyhow, that's that. And that is the JMRA Football Podcast. The day after Sunday action. We'll be back with you later on in the week. Until next time, happy football, everybody. See ya.